You get so much more out of life by being kind to human beings. Because being kind to human beings, what is the mirror back to us? It's kindness. On my first trip to India, that giving jobs to people was one of the greatest things that you could ever, do for another individual. I've been dedicated to Sri Lanka since I was a young girl out of college. We're artists. We want to do the best we possibly can. But if we do something and it doesn't come out exactly the way that we would like it to come out, we feel bad about it. It's like, I'm going to work until I die. I love my work. I will always work. It's what I am. It's what I am.
At Echelon Studios today is the founder of a global fashion design business. The business, Bennett & Company, is Victoria's Secret's longest standing premium partner with factories across Asia. Its ethical and sustainable business model isn't just theory. It's profitable, scalable, and focused on community and worker well-being. Jacalyn Bennett, it's wonderful to have you join us here at Echelon Studios. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor.
I think let's start with something that's relevant to Sri Lanka and the industry. You've been engaging Sri Lankan manufacturers and the Sri Lankan supply chain for high-end lingerie for several decades. In your view, how is the shifting landscape for demand in this area likely to impact Sri Lankan manufacturers?
Due to the fact that Sri Lanka has been involved in garment manufacturing since the 1970s, I think that it's very important that we never fall back upon our laurels. We do not fall back upon, we've been manufacturing for such a long time, we're perfect, everybody knows about, Sri Lanka, beautiful garment manufacturing, beautiful production, lovely factories, beautiful landscape, exquisite environment. It's a wonderful place to work. People are friendly. There's always a smile on. Means everything to people who are visiting from the outside. However, I think that when we become too comfortable with, we've been manufacturing in Sri Lanka for a very long time, we feel secure that we will always have wonderful business with our customers. At that moment in time, I think that's the moment where we have to say, no, we can never be too comfortable. Garment industries is a volatile industry, and we should never become so comfortable that we don't look at every single day as what newness can I bring to my organization as a garment manufacturer here in Sri Lanka?
You're talking about we shouldn't fall back on our laurels. You're talking about we should respond to potentially the change that's out there and the demands that are out there. It sounds to me like you're advising caution right now. Is there a specific reason to do so?
Yes. There are many other countries that have followed what Sri Lanka is doing, and they've created tremendous competition for Sri Lanka. Sadly, in the garment industry, pricing is high in Sri Lanka because the industry might have become a little too laid back. One never expects to lose their customers. We always have to worry about that. Customers, will always find another country that the prices could be lower. From my point of view, I've been dedicated to Sri Lanka since I was a young girl out of college. My boss, Martin Trust, gave me the opportunity to come to Sri Lanka and immediately start working here. And I was so happy. And in those days, it was cottage industry.
Sure.
So cottage industry was a woman, an entrepreneurial, spirited woman who had a few sewing machines, and she knew how to sew, and she could hire some of her friends and give jobs. And, this is the most wonderful thing in the world, to give jobs to people.
Competitiveness in garments can be through several ways, I suppose. One is cost. There is then the ability to do very fine, detailed work that gives you a competitive advantage. There's the ability to innovate that can give you a competitive advantage. There's that ability when your industry is so well connected to supply chains, then the lead times, etc., are much lower here, and that can be a competitive advantage. There can also be a design-led competitive advantage. Where do you think Sri Lanka is doing well? And if you are cautioning based on cost, what is the underlying pressure that is leading to that higher cost?
It is the cost of doing business. The rent that factories will have to pay, the rent has gone up tremendously to be able to put through renovation on their own buildings. Sri Lanka, of course, it's a warm country. So in the warmth and moisture, factories can get run down quickly. I have a factory in China, and I have to paint twice a year.
Right.
So we're constantly cleaning. We give talks. We have people come in and give talks on cleanliness, on hygiene. We have a full-time nurse working with us. We have a sick room. So there's rising costs in every area.
Sri Lanka has long held the view that, what we lose, or despite us being a relatively expensive destination for manufacturing, that our design prowess, that our supply chain prowess, that our good relationships with the big brands and innovation will see us through. But you're suggesting that some of those basic stuff around hygiene, the quality of your facilities matter, and that Sri Lanka is not doing very well in those areas.
I apologize to say that it's like when your mother-in-law comes to dinner, do you not clean your whole house?
Sure.
So this is the way that I look at it. My clients, yes, they're people that I have known for a long time, and that I, trust them. I believe in them. I know that they're good, hearted human beings. They care tremendously about the quality of their garments. They want to work in clean environments. But I think sometimes that, we may become a little bit lackadaisical. We think that they'll remember how beautiful it looked last year, but we can never do that. I always think of it in terms of like, if my mother-in-law were coming to visit, I'd clean the entire house. And I think it's a wise way to look at that business, when you have guests, when you have your clients come to visit, you want to have the most perfect showing for your factory, for the facilities. Everything has to be clean. It has to be neat. And it also shows your employees that you care about them, to make, the office as beautiful as you possibly can, so that they enjoy coming to work. Because it can't just be a one-way street. You have to show that you care about your employees by creating a beautiful space. The toilets, the lavatories, the canteens, the staircases, has to be looked at.
Do you think what you're talking about is true of the entire industry in Sri Lanka? Or is this a challenge that a section of the industry face more acutely than others?
In the garment manufacturing area, there's a factory that I work with. Their factories, are the quality is beautiful for the production, but they tend to be, they're going to be older factories, and you can have 1,200 human beings walking into a factory multiple times a day. The wear and tear for a factory is much greater than it would be for other areas in industry.
Sure. Let's go back, because your association with Sri Lanka, you mentioned just slightly there, started with the Martin Trust. And the Martin Trust is revered by or admired by the industry for the contribution it made to to sort of getting Sri Lanka into the key global supply chains on women's lingerie.
Yes.
In that time, what about Sri Lanka's industry do you think attracted these big brands to Sri Lanka? What about Sri Lanka's position in the global supply chain made it an attractive destination to source lingerie out of?
As garment manufacturers, it is our job to travel around the world looking for new countries to manufacture product in. When people ask me, what is my favorite country in the world? I always say Sri Lanka. It's magnificent, it's beautiful, the people are kind. When Marty took his first trip to Sri Lanka, he loved it. He, said all of the same things that I'm saying. And, prior to that, we had been working in India. So it's a beautiful country, and why wouldn't people want to work in a beautiful country?
I want to understand this. You yourself, Bennett and Company, has its own manufacturing facility.
Yes.
In Guangzhou, China.
For the
if you're
past
such a
30
fan
years.
of Sri Lanka, I'm sure you considered this as a potential location for your own factory that manufactures very high-end lingerie, a very premium line for a big brand. What does Guangzhou, China, bring to Bennett & Co. that Sri Lanka cannot?
So there is something very important. China is a vertical country for production. So this is very important. And, I personally worked on that. I'm a textile designer as well as a fashion designer. So for me, when you remove certain transportation obstacles, like shipping the fabric from one country to another, I had at the time, when I was working in China, I was shipping my fabric from Korea. It didn't make sense to do that. So I worked with various friends of mine who, were able to be inspired to set up vertical fabric production. And similarly, working in Sri Lanka throughout the late 70s and early 80s, that was my goal as well, was working with the fabric mills to perfect the quality of the fabric so that we could have the fabric available to us in a much more convenient manner.
And the product you manufacture is intricate. It's not merely only a functional garment. It's a fashion garment.
They are, yes.
They are. They are part of a plethora of things that make women feel great.
That's right. Yes.
Make them feel beautiful. Make them feel confident.
Yes.
Right. The inputs that go towards making an intricate garment are quite different to one that is mass market produced, which doesn't require as many hours of work.
Yes.
Does Sri Lanka still have an edge in making complex garments, you think? Sri Lanka certainly has a disadvantage because it's not so vertically integrated. We have to import most of our inputs and in small quantities, right?
Yes.
For garments like high-end lingerie. So surely that's a disadvantage for us. But what about our skill levels at making intricate stuff? Can we compete with what you have in Guangzhou?
I believe that when you have the desire to be the best that you can possibly be, when you wake up in the morning, it's like there has to be a goal in your heart that you set the positive intentionality that I am going to be even better today than I was yesterday. I have something new that I can learn today that I did not know yesterday. I think so much of it has to do with a philosophical approach of positive intentionality. So yes, the Sri Lankan people they're happy, again, the smiling faces. Yes, they're highly skilled, but we can always learn more. So, yesterday I went to my friend's hand beating facility. The company's name is Timex, and they're very old friends of mine. They're constantly teaching their people more skill sets and providing weekly discussions with their team, inspirational discussions, of self, hygiene, a healthy mind is a healthy body. A healthy body means that you can focus on the garments that you're making. This is a highly skilled craft. So there's always new opportunities for increasing one's skill set.
Talk to me about Bennett and Company, Jacalyn. This is the business you founded almost 40 years ago.
Yes.
Right. What role does it play in a supply chain? How much value do you bring to the manufacturers who may work with you and to the brands that may source product from you? What do you actually supply?
My love, my heart, my entire being. I give of myself over 100% of my entirety to my employees, to my clients, to the supply chain. They know if the supply chain knows if they're working with Bennett and Company, that we honor them, we respect them. I have a very specific way of working rather than being protective the way so many people are. It's like, oh, you can't see my product. It's like, yes, I want to show you because I want you to teach me how can I be better? How can I do a better job for you? What would you like me to do? The gentleman that I work with, Amir Ashraf, he said, it's a win-win situation. The more that, that they share with me, the more I share with them, and the more I share with them, the more it's a family. And I think that attitude is something that is really, if I may say, it's missing from the business world. And that is the reason why I decided to stay in the garment industry. I went to art school for 8 years, art high school and art college. But what really impressed me was my first trip to India after I graduated college, that I could see that I could help more people. I was very interested in social services. This is something that, I had planned to make that my life's work. And what I realized on my first trip to India was that I could do more at a factory level, helping the people. I could help hundreds of people versus helping a few families at a time. That impressed me dramatically, and I wish that I could share that alone to so many of my clients.
I'm just curious, how does that fit with what you do? You have this deep desire for volunteerism.
Yeah.
You want to make an impact in society. And it's not to suggest that the big brands of the world don't want to leave a good impact. However, their top motives, their top motivations may not be impact. It may be success measured in financial terms, shareholder value maximization, and scale.
Yes. Yes.
How do you reconcile the two? Your success, doing what you do,
Yeah.
working alongside these big brands, which are objectives that don't necessarily always perfectly align with those that you
Yes.
have.
What I suggest is never give up. It's perhaps some people were taught, I have several different business degrees, and the degrees the focus is the bottom line, the bottom line, the bottom line. And I disagree with that way of looking at things. Yes, of course, you have to be successful. And if you're doing things properly from start to finish, you will be successful. And then the success of the company, of course, will reflect in the success that you can bring to your employees. And it is a win-win for everybody. If you look at your company as a family, how would you want to be treated? How would you want your family members to treat you? Would you want them to treat you with respect, with kindness, with care, with compassion? Or do you want to just be a number?
Has it always worked for you in practice? Have you been able to treat your teams as your family?
I have to. They are my family.
Has it ever come into I'm sure it comes into conflict with objectives, with goals, with deadlines, with the need to make sure that something you're doing is ultimately going to be profitable. How do you balance that?
It's just, for me, it's logic. It's just simple logic. If you're having a team meeting, if we're having a team meeting and, we have a new opportunity with one of our important clients, we presented it. This is a new opportunity and this is the deadline. These are all things that can be trained. Of course, you have to start with a human being that has, a heart and a mind that is interconnected and that is unified. So the mind cannot be on one subject and the heart on another, and then the passion in another area. Everything has to be unified. I always use the expression of like the different fingers on our hands. Each finger has its own purpose, and it's unified. So, yes, there's finance, there's hygiene, there's keeping a building clean, there's deliveries have to be made on time. We must treat our supply chain clients with respect and kindness and work with everybody as a family member. These are the principles of Bennett and Company. Otherwise, I would just be another organization. But my company has survived for 40 years, and for an American company, that's unusual. For a European company or a Sri Lankan company, maybe that's not, so unusual because, your philosophies are different than the American, companies. They'll go in and out of, a business without thinking. It's like if a customer, decides to go to another country and say, oh, we can get cheaper prices in another country, it's like, but what are they doing to the families? What are they doing to the people? What will happen? During COVID, several smaller factories closed down, because people were afraid to travel to Sri Lanka. They were afraid to travel anywhere. Because, people were terrified of, catching, this terrible, it's like an influenza, it's a flu. But what happened to those factories that had to close down because they couldn't, pay the people? They had no orders. Some of these girls, they did the only thing that they could do. They went, I don't believe this, but it is true. This story is true. that they, went into selling their bodies. This to me is shocking. It goes against everything that I was taught, as a young, woman in this world, is that, you can always do something. You can waitress, you can sew for personal friends, there's always an opportunity to make money in a different way. So I really do believe that that we all have to be more vigilant, that all people, clients, supply chain, factories, we all need to wake up and say, okay, what are the worst possible scenarios that could take place? Could we lose our business? What is our edge?
Give me a scale about Bennett and Co. You are both a designer and a manufacturer. Do you always manufacture everything you design? Do you design and provide designing as a service?
Yes.
And only manufacture part of that catalog? Give me a sense about scale.
Whatever our customers, wherever our customers need us, our clients have been with us, for a very long period of time. They, in this industry, it seems like a very large industry, but in actuality, it's a small industry in the respect that everybody is friends with everybody else. I had meetings with some lovely, lovely people that I work with at Victoria's Secret and Mast Industries, and the thing that we all love is that we've worked for the same people at various times of our careers, and so there is like a family feeling that we do have with the people that we, with our clients and our supply chain. Again, it's the dedication, the dedication to, being the best that you possibly can be. And that's the most important thing, is to be the best human being that, wake up in the morning and set my intentionality to be the best that I possibly can be that day. And, we have very strong principles, guiding values in my company. And it's always be, kind with your words. Also witness the mind to make sure that, our thoughts are not, betraying us or... So I have a very strict code of conduct that I, insist upon for myself, and that code of conduct I also do insist upon my employees. They don't have to believe everything that I believe, but when it comes to a code of conduct, then yes.
You started talking there about your guiding principles. You talked about being kind. Can you take us through the list of guiding principles at Bennett & Co. that you think are the foundation and made you successful?
Well, it's a very large list,
Sure.
but I have simplified my principles to five principles, because I feel that it's manageable. But the first one is being impeccable with your words, really witnessing, your words and witnessing the effect that your words will have upon another human being. Like, not to gossip. Gossiping is really, it's against the law at our company. So we don't respect, if anybody has the time to gossip, they're not doing their work. This is, how I think. And so, we look deeply at, what is the motivation? What is the motivation to make you proud of yourself as a human being? What makes you proud? When you accomplish your job well done, it's something, and I'm not saying pride, as something to be opposite to humble, because I think humility is a very important critical value, and I try to remind people to be humble, because humble, the word humble is to be human, and we are earth creatures, with a guide of reaching to a higher spiritual value, to give our hearts, to make our hearts feel good. And then the other thing, which is very difficult, I'm still working on this one, it's to try not to take anything personally, because sometimes we're artists. If we do something and it doesn't come out exactly the way that we would like it to come out, we feel bad about it. But we don't know, perhaps, the client that we're working with, or a supply chain partner, maybe they were having a bad day. We notice you're not in the same, wonderful spirit that you're always in. Find out what's going on for the person, and to be compassionate. These are things that should never be lost. We're interacting with textile companies, we're interacting with designers, we're interacting with our customers, we're interacting with lace suppliers, with thread suppliers, button suppliers. We're interacting with so many people. If anything were to happen to us, and if we didn't do a good job, then what would happen to all of those people we interact with? There's a tremendous amount of responsibility on our shoulders that we must take good care, of the work that we do. It's not just for ourselves, it's for everybody else that we work with.
It strikes me, those guiding principles are less about business performance, are more about peace of mind.
Beautiful.
Right?
Yes, beautiful. Thank you very much for seeing that.
And yet it leads to, for Bennett & Co., it's led to a very successful, globally competitive business.
Yes, it has. Which has allowed me to do more volunteer work, to be involved in, so the success that we have, at Bennett & Company has allowed me to be more generous with other, organizations that mean so much to me. I would never be able to help all of the people that I can help if it weren't for my being strict with my own mind, with my own body, with my own heart, with my focus, and with care and compassion, for all human beings that I work with.
Do your guiding principles resonate as strongly, do you think, with your team? Obviously you believe in them, and then it's undeniable that they've led to a level of success that has put Bennett & Co. among the top suppliers in the world, or top designers for very high-end lingerie. Mm-hmm. How many pieces of lingerie do you design or manufacture in a year?
Millions, multiple millions.
In a year?
In a year, yes. Right. So we have to be very disciplined and organized within ourselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the correct focus, of mind, heart, spirit, totally integrated, the 10 fingers, the two hands coming together. And so we must be, it's our responsibility. And it's our responsibility to our families. It's giving jobs to people is, I didn't know this when I was very, very, very young, but I learned it, on my first trip to India, that giving jobs to people was one of the greatest things that you could ever do for another individual. I did have a joint venture up in Coronegla area, up on the Kandy Road. And there would be people, because I would come to Sri Lanka for months at a time. There was a man who said, "Please, will you give me a job?" I said, "Can you sweep?" And he said, "I can sweep." I said, "You have a job." It's like it's a beautiful thing to give work to another human being.
Does that come into conflict with your team? Your own spirituality. What do you expect from the business and how it should function with the team? Does it come into conflict?
Very initially, there were a few people that didn't, they didn't understand what I was doing, but that's because they really just didn't understand, and they weren't the right people for us. So my approach is a very philosophical one. It's a different approach, but if I was like everybody else, I would be like boring, and I wouldn't have wanted to stay with my company either. I keep setting new principles, additional principles. So yes, initially there were some people that they weren't the right employees for us, and we did invite them, to seek employment elsewhere. So this philosophy may not be for everybody. However, this philosophy fills your heart with love and kindness and care and compassion. If you don't love the world, how do you take care of the world? If you don't have self-respect for yourself, then how do you take care of the planet?
Jacalyn, you're a very spiritual person. Your spirituality first before everything else, before business, for instance. Has it ever have you had moments when you questioned your choice to be a businesswoman in addition to being the spiritual person you are? Had you thought, is this the right thing to do for me?
I know this is going to sound strange, but no, I really feel that I was guided to do this. I think that helping other human beings and by giving them, meaningful employment, the people who are running the company they care as much for all of the employees as they do for themselves. There's not a two-standard program. I love my team. They're my family, the people that I work with, and I feel the same way about my clients. I feel the same way about my customers. I really care for them. There's been a couple of times where my father expected myself and my sister to become attorneys as he was. So I thought, could I do more if I had been, an attorney? Could I do more involved in politics? Could I be more involved? And I also love history, the history of all cultures that has given me the knowledge and awareness that, we must treat each other with kindness, with care and compassion. And these are not empty words. If, at an early age also, I said, it's like, how am I going to fight for world peace? I want there to be world peace. And, we used to have demonstrations in the 1970s. We didn't want to be at war with Vietnam. We didn't want to send our young people. I think that for me, the most important thing is giving jobs to human beings and to have economic interdependency upon other countries. I'm grateful that my fabric comes from China, and I'm grateful that I can send suppliers that I've worked with for 20 or 30 years to come to Sri Lanka and have additional business here.
What keeps you motivated? You've been doing this a long time, right? I would fathom that, you don't have to work. And then there's that attraction of spirituality. You're a spiritual person. You can choose to do whatever you want with your time right now. But you keep working. You're here in Sri Lanka evaluating new opportunities for manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
To build something that will be part of the global supply chain.
Right.
What keeps you motivated doing that versus pursuing full-time something else?
Well, I actually do a lot of other things.
Okay.
I do teach painting in my company. We have once a year we have a painting class, and I do ask everybody to participate in the painting. We, work for a few hours every morning, and we will do that we'll focus on that for like a week. And it gives the people like another way to look at art, because everything is art. This is an art. There's an art to absolutely everything. And so I even mentioned to a young woman this past week, that, she said, Madam, why are you working? And I said, it's like I'm going to work until I die. I love my work. I will always work. It's what I am. It's what I am. And if I want global peace so badly, that I would dedicate my life to achieving peace, then I must achieve peace within myself. How can I, be the most peaceful? And I'm not always peaceful.
Right.
We're human
I was
beings.
curious, yeah.
We're human beings, It's like human beings are not perfect. We wouldn't probably be here if we were, so perfect. The one thing that I always say to myself is that I want to be able to leave this planet a little bit better for having been here and for having shared the philosophies that I've developed over all the years in living on this planet. You get so much more out of life by being kind to human beings. The wonderful people, I shared that I'm working with, lovely friends that I've known for, quite a few decades, and I'm so grateful to have an opportunity to work with him again. It's, I don't want Sri Lanka to lose. It's, 40, 50 years of focus, and much longer than that. But I don't want Sri Lanka to lose everything that everybody worked so hard to create, and that's why I'm back in Sri Lanka. We have to keep, the craft, alive and healthy in Sri Lanka. And I will do everything, at my level best to make sure that takes place.
Jacalyn Bennett, thank you. That's been a wonderful conversation. Mm-hmm. I think you gave us a deep insight to your motivations and how this spiritual-led approach is also a way to create an alternative way, if at all, to create still a very global and successful organization.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a joy talking with you and getting to know you, and I really deeply appreciate this opportunity that you're giving to me, and may it inspire many, 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 many beings and many corporations to perhaps just adjust gently, and create and have more kindness in their business.
The kind way to do business.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. An honor. It's a duty.